Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I wanted to share with you a meal that I ate growing up as a poor kid. It's super cheap and filling, and it just happens to be a very popular Southern meal. But first, I want to share with you the results from last week's video, where I asked if you'd like to see a more extreme family budget challenge, somewhere between $10 to $15 for the week. I told you that if I got over 1,000 likes within 3 days, I would do it, and I had an overwhelmingly positive response from that, so it does look like there is a want for that type of video, and most people wanted to see a week for 15 bucks. So that video will be coming next Sunday. Make sure your notifications tab is on so you'll know when I release it. And thank you so much to everyone that participated in that. I definitely want to make the kind of videos that are most helpful. Okay, now let's talk about the meal I'll be making in today's video. My parents were very poor. Some of you may remember that video where I shared how one of my favorite childhood memories was a time when my dad got us a big bunch of food to eat when we didn't have any. It was wonderful. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because a lot of us with impoverished backgrounds have emotional associations with food. And honestly, it's one of the reasons why I do this channel. When I used to go to my grandma's house, she made me feel so loved, and she was always cooking me the most delicious food. And so I kind of grew up with this association of when you love someone, you feed them well. Food is my love language, and it's why I always get excited when I have a delicious recipe to share with you guys, because everyone deserves to eat well. Anyway, today I'm making a meal that I grew up eating probably 90% of the time. And I love this meal, and it's very inexpensive to make. I have some pinto beans that I buy in bulk from Sam's Club, and currently they're about 77 cents a pound, which is a great deal. I'll be making some cornbread with this cornmeal. I purchased this Quaker brand at Walmart because it was less expensive and sold in a smaller quantity, but I've always used the Albers brand in the past, and that's been good. I had this leftover red onion in the fridge, but I usually use white, but I'm just going to go ahead and use this, and I'm sure it'll be fine. And I'm going to make some potatoes, and I'm also going to be making some fried okra in cornmeal. I've got some frozen okra that I'm going to be using. This was actually a treat that I ended up eating at my grandma's. My mom almost never made that for us. I'm not sure if it was because she couldn't afford it, or maybe it wasn't available in the stores where we lived. I got something else in this container from Sam's Club, and then when I was done, I just washed it out and used it as a bulk storage container, and I love the way these look in my pantry. I have lots of delicious recipes for beans, so I always like to have a good supply of these. I also have a big supply of black beans. These are probably my two favorite beans, although I have been eating a lot of chickpeas lately. In the video I referred to earlier when I talked about my childhood, I mentioned how when you're food insecure as a child, you have a tendency to want to keep a lot of food around as an adult. And me pouring food from my large food storage containers kind of reminded me of that. But many of you posted comments after that video on how much you could relate to that feeling of wanting to have food around to make you feel secure and just to give you peace of mind. My grandma went through the Great Depression, so she had food stored everywhere in her house. And honestly, going to her place was like going to Disneyland for me. I have memories of my grandma standing and picking through her beans, but manufacturing has developed so much that today the beans are so clean, I almost never find anything in them. This is probably an unnecessary step now. I only found this one small piece of broken bean that I'm pulling out. I normally cook beans in my crock pot, but today I need them to cook quicker, so I'm just boiling them in my Dutch oven with lots of water. And about halfway through, I usually add in my salt, and I cook them till they are just tender. I don't like them to be overly tender to where they kind of mush up, especially since a lot of times the day after I'll use these and make like a chipotle bowl with them. Some of my viewers are allergic to beans and simply can't eat them, but some of my viewers haven't eaten beans at all, so it might upset their stomach if they eat a lot all at once. If you're new to eating these, I suggest eating a small amount and then increasing the amount that you eat over time. I'll make a pan of cornbread to go along with this meal, and I'm going to be using this milk because I have it in my fridge. However, I have frequently substituted water for milk, and it always turns out just fine. There was never milk in my house growing up, so I think maybe she was using powdered milk. But I was talking to a viewer the other day, and she was saying even the powdered milk is expensive now. So if you can't afford it, I think I would just go ahead and use water. I'll put the recipe for you in the description area of my video, but I'm actually using the Albers cornmeal recipe, and like I said, it's the one I've always used. I've always loved it. The only difference I can really see on how people make their cornbread is that some people like theirs a little sweeter. This recipe calls for a 1/4 cup of sugar, and that's exactly how I like mine. And you could also substitute out those little boxes of, premix cornbread for, I think they're 63 cents right now. And those are a little bit sweet for me, and I like this cornbread much better. If you have some big eaters in your family and you're trying to save money on food, this is a great meal to make, because with a bag of potatoes, some eggs, some cornmeal, and beans, you can make so many meals for the week. One of the tricks to making a good cornbread is to make it in a well-seasoned cast iron skillet. You can use a different kind of pan, but just make sure it's non-stick. I understand that not everybody has a cast iron skillet. It cooks it perfectly and prevents the cornbread from sticking. I've always liked a nice crust on mine, so I pour a little oil in the bottom of the pan and I get it very hot before I pour in the batter. See how the cornmeal is sizzling when it hits the oil? That's exactly what you want. And then immediately after pouring the batter in, I put it in a 400-degree oven for 25 minutes. This cornbread is perfect. It's crispy on the bottom and fluffy on the inside. This kind is much lighter and fluffier than the kind in the little boxes. If there's ever a time that I like to use butter, it's with cornbread. If you haven't tried it this way, you owe it to yourself to make it at least once. I also made a Mexican spoon bread type of cornbread that some of my viewers said is their family's new favorite recipe. I'll put a link to that in the description area of my video, but it's more of a moist bread and more dense. And it has cheddar cheese and green chilies in it and a can of cream style corn. It's really delicious, but very different from this version of cornbread. I'm also going to be making some fried potatoes with onions to go with this dish, and I just really wanted to cook these in the cast iron skillet. Otherwise, I could have been making these while my cornbread was cooking, but I only have 2 cast iron skillets. I have the regular size one and then a little mini one that my son got me for Christmas. While those are cooking, I'm going to make just a little snack, and this is how I like to do it. I like to break up a little bit of the cornbread and then just pour some of the beans over with that delicious broth. I don't add anything besides salt to mine. I know my grandma used to add like a ham hock to it, but I find that the regular bean seasoning just by itself is delicious. And then I added a little bit of this Louisiana hot sauce. I accidentally picked up the extra hot, but it's not really that hot, so it's been fine. Sometimes I like to mix this in with salsa, but this is just so good. The flavoring of the bean broth goes over that cornbread, and it's such a satisfying meal. I usually cook my potatoes about halfway through before I add in the onions, just to make sure that my onions don't burn. Then I add pepper and garlic salt. While my potatoes are cooking, I'm going to make the fried okra, and I haven't made this in years. I'm using frozen okra that I just thawed out, and I think this would be better with fresh, but this is what I have. And when I've made this before, I just cooked mine with only cornmeal without the egg. But I looked online and the recipes with the most positive reviews were dipped in egg. It's not supposed to be a thick batter. It's just supposed to be enough to give it a little bit of a coating. And I salted the mixture in there and then fried it in a hot pan until they were crispy. I'm excited to eat this meal. The only reason I don't make it more often is because it does feel like a lot of cooking, but this is a meal that you can cook once and eat twice with the next day. I've always enjoyed this as leftovers, and when you're eating on a super tight budget and need to feed big eaters, you're either going to need to cook or you're going to need to increase the budget. Okay, let's try the okra first. Okay, it's nice and crunchy. It doesn't taste as airy and light as the kind that I remembered. And I'm not sure if it's because of the egg batter or because I used the frozen okra. So I need my Southern cooks to leave me comments about that. In one of my $1 a day challenges, instead of making fried green tomatoes, I made fried red tomatoes and I dipped them in a cornmeal batter and they were so good. And then you could top them with a little ranch dressing. You could also do that if you don't like okra. There's probably quite a few vegetables that you could roll in cornmeal and fry, and they would be delicious. These potatoes are really, really good too. It's amazing how good they are if you just add some onions and garlic salt to them. My dad used to either eat this meal with ketchup or he would eat this meal alongside a wedge of white onion. Southerners have lots of other things that they do with cornbread. Like my grandma used to eat cornbread and milk. That was one of her favorite treats. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I wanted to make this for you just to give you some more ideas on meals that you can make if you have family members with big appetites like teenage boys. This kind of food is super filling, but very cheap to make. I'll be back next week with that extreme budget challenge that we talked about earlier. Thanks so much for watching my video, friends. I'll see you Sunday.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens to